So it's time for me to pass the baton now. Next up, we will be in hearing from Bill Price on broadband overview. Bill Price is the GTA lead to support the Georgia State broadband effort. Bill will moderate today's broadband sessions. Bill, it's all yours.
Thank you, Kyle. Great to be here. Good morning. Like Kyle said, I'm with GTA, and I'm going to provide you with a brief overview and a sample of what's been happening at the state level on broadband before we go into the three specific sessions on our agenda today. Each of those sessions will go deeper into connecting students, activities that's been going on, technical resource assistance development that's been going on, and the new state broadband grant program that's coming online this year as well. Broadband is and has been a key focus of our governor, our legislators, community leaders, and citizens for quite some time, probably around a decade or more. The state goal is to expand broadband access and availability and capability to close the digital divide and hopefully leave no one behind. The state has been developing strategies. We've developed a broadband plan, data and maps and tools and technical resource assistance. We've been coordinating, and now we have funding for the state grant program that you're going to hear about later. This slide is a picture. Kyle, can you see my, I'm not sure I'm actually showing the slides that I meant to be showing. Hang on a second here. Here we go. Kyle, can you see that slide? I guess he can. Anyway, in 2018, legislation was passed that gave a group of agencies broadband responsibilities and projects. The core team is comprised of the agencies on this slide: Department of Community Affairs, Georgia Department of Transportation, GTA, where I work, Georgia Department of Economic Development, the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at UGA, and the State Properties Commission. So we've been doing a lot together. We've gotten organized and coordinated, and we're collaborating and sharing resources and assets, and we've acquired external expertise as well where we have gaps. Collectively, we form the basis of the state broadband team, and that's led by the Department of Community Affairs. So far, we've developed a state broadband plan. We have and are developing data and tools to provide assistance to communities and providers, anybody who's interested in expanding broadband. We have published annual progress reports. We're doing data and map updates, broadband map updates each year. We also have formed a advisory committee, and that's led by Commissioner Nunn from DCA and Executive Director Rhodes from GTA. And the purpose of that is to improve coordination and collaboration across local government with state government and provider activities, where we can. And of course, we get input from all of those organizations and entities on the plan and on each report that we published this year. The next report will be published in June, I believe. One of the projects that you'll hear about later today in detail is the broadband mapping project, which has been ongoing. We began in the late part of 2018, putting that together. It's a combined effort led by DCA, University of Georgia, Carl Vinson Institute, Georgia Technology Authority, and 44 broadband providers, ISPs in the state, to identify where there are unserved locations and to identify census blocks that are coded as either served or unserved based on the statutory definition, and to determine, how many locations and how many people are unserved in our state. One of the things that's been going on is DCA has been providing assistance to communities with regard to comprehensive planning, developing model ordinances, community and site broadband designation program. So that's been going on. Another thing that's been going on that the team has done is we have focused a lot on tracking and following and understanding federal funding programs that impact broadband. One of those is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund from the FCC, which has awarded $326 million to 15 companies in the state of Georgia. There are more funding programs coming this year There'll be another round of USDA Reconnect. NTIA has several grant programs that are launching in the summer this year. And of course, we're all waiting to hear the rules from Treasury Department on the use of ARP funds for broadband expansion in the state. DCA has been working closely with USDA on Reconnect, and we've done everything we can to help Georgia applicants receive more points in grant applications. And of course, we stand ready with lots of technical resource capabilities, data to help applicants who are applying for broadband funding with USDA Reconnect. I wanted to highlight the University of Georgia Carl Vinson Institute of Government because they're an incredible resource for all of us when it comes to gathering data, matching data up, mapping it, visualizing it, creating tools to manipulate the data. So if you're in local government and you're thinking about funding a broadband project, they're an incredible resource for you and are available as we are as a team. They have lots of data sets that you would want to have available in putting together a grant application, whether it's for the state grant program or for any of these various federal programs. DOT has been a great partner, and they're evaluating options per the statute to expand broadband. They have lots of assets that could be utilized and that they're working through how that might be done effectively and in a positive way to expand broadband. They have 300 miles of fiber network of their own in Metro Atlanta. They've got 18,000 miles of right of way. They have an economic and community development staff, and they have a P3 program to deploy broadband fiber along the interstates. And they're looking at what they could do on state roads, right of way access, fee structure, dig once, and the possibility of investing in conduit system. The State Properties Commission, GTA worked with the State Properties Commission last year, and we evaluated the potential use of state properties, state assets. They have over 13,000 buildings and 600,000 acres. So we've done an evaluation of how that might be utilized to benefit broadband expansion in the state. Department of Community Affairs, through the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative, will launch the state grant program this year to invest in projects to expand broadband in unserved areas in the state. And you're going to hear about that in detail this afternoon. And we've all been working with Department of Education and Keith and his team and the 216 school districts to determine what are the options to expand and increase broadband access to Georgia students. I think, like Keith had said earlier, we have a lot of students, and many of those live at or below poverty level. So there is an affordability and ability to pay for issue and concern there that we've been dealing with and evaluating what the options are. And then we've identified that there's over 135,000 K-12 student locations who can't access broadband today. So we have that. We've been looking at closely. DOE sponsored, and we worked with them, as all the rest of the team have, to do a wireless broadband options analysis report. That's downloadable. It's about 60 to 80 pages long. It's very in-depth. It was to evaluate the use of various wireless technologies to provide connectivity to students, and especially in some of our areas in our state and our counties that have greater access issues. Another thing that we did together, all of us, libraries, schools, providers, DCA, DOE, ACZ, GMA, all of us got together and we created a Wi-Fi access point map for students in the state of Georgia. That's online at the Department of Community Affairs website. Lastly, one of the big efforts, DOE in collaboration with the broadband team and all the agencies, we've been working to develop what are the student connectivity options, primarily focused with AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile to support the 216 school districts as their tech staffs have been trying to figure out how to provide more connectivity to students. With funding from the governor, they've deployed thousands of Wi-Fi rangers, which are in school buses and deployed by the school districts to make it convenient for students to get online, to do homework, They've deployed Wi-Fi extenders on school buildings to provide Wi-Fi access in the parking lots. And right now they're preparing for a internet service for low-income students, where the state will be paying for internet access for qualified eligible students in low-income housing. With that, I'm finished with the overview. And so I want to introduce you to Bob Swiggum and Chris Shealy from the Department of Education, who have been at the forefront in the trenches, working with the school districts and the schools to work out these various connectivity options for students in the state of Georgia. Let's see, I see Bob. Bob, you want to unmute? And I see Chris. And I'm going to stop my screen share once I figure out how to do that. And there we go. I think Chris, Bob, which one of you guys are going to go first?
Sir, I think I'm going to take it off first.
Okay, so I think you can screen share.
I'm actually just going to talk my way through it.
Okay, buddy.
Hey guys, I'm Chris Shealy. I'm with the Department of Education. Like Bill said, I'm the Director of IT Strategy and Enterprise Services. I kind of got thrust into a role of COVID response really quickly, just a little over a year ago. And one of the things that we realized right offhand was, oh my gosh, how bad is this going to be for the school districts? Because we originally thought that we were only going to be taking about a 2-week break, and then a lot of school is done for the school year as far as in-person learning goes. So we had to figure out how bad is this really going to be for the school districts. So we were like, where do we start to figure this out? What will districts need to be successful in distance learning, home-based learning? Well, we knew to accomplish that students and teachers were both going to need devices, and they were going to need internet connectivity. One of the problems that we face, though, is districts typically do not inventory home internet access by students or teachers. We also knew that we were also facing a big digital divide in our state, especially in the rural areas. And then we also had the issue of equity, just students not being able to get devices based on many different demographic reasons. So one of the first things that we did was we reviewed our data that we've collected from school systems every year. We do an annual technology inventory to determine what the initial need might be, looking at a computer ratio, a student to computer ratio. One of the things we figured at first was, okay, this really isn't that bad. So we looked at the data a little bit further, then realized it's not near as good as we thought. When we went back and looked at our inventory, we include things like desktops, because this inventory is based off of, what is available for the students while they're in a building. So once we removed the desktops and any older devices that were 5 years old or older, we ended up with a computer to student ratio that was not kind to distance learning. So we also knew that just because of this reason, there was going to be a huge, crazy rush to try to buy devices. This was even compounded even more when the realization set in that our next school year, 2021 school year, was not going to be what we were anticipating, and that more than likely all school districts were going to start back online with distance learning. And we had no idea how long this was going to last. So one of the things that we started doing was, trying to figure out, okay, what different avenues do we have? Funding was going to be a big issue because, we were already facing the end of the fiscal year at that time. School districts' budgets are very strapped. They were tight to begin with because of budget reductions. And we knew going into FY21 that the reductions were hit even more. So, and a part of this, we started receiving inquiries from the philanthropic community wanting to be able to help. So, but they also had differing demographic requirements of where they would like to apply assistance for technology. So one of the things we did was we directly surveyed all the school districts as quickly as we could to find out what they needed as far as devices and Wi-Fi access. We were shocked at the results that came back. Districts identified that they needed close to 500,000 computing devices, and over 185,000 hotspots were anticipated to have to be deployed to accomplish distance learning starting for the school year. So one of the things I did was I contacted GTA and talked with them about the telecommunication contracts and what the need was going to be coming forward and what could we possibly do. So GTA hosted an all call of all telecommunication companies and their representatives to hear the need coming from school systems and the agency. I asked them to think outside of the corporate model, the profit center focus, and to become an education partner to help us in educating students who are faced with an unprecedented challenge of learning from home. With all the focus on assisting education, the wireless carriers came to the plate with aggressive, unlimited data plans to support distance learning. Before COVID, we had state data plans that were starting around $37.99 per month for unlimited data. The initial plan offers that started coming in for education and going through the GTA contracting process were starting at $20 and going up to $27. Those monthly costs also included SIPA filtering. So that is a Children's Internet Protection Act that was instituted by the FCC for any district or educational institution that receives federal funding through the E-rate program. It's filtering for, content of pornography, guns, anything harmful would be considered harmful for a student to see. Those products aren't cheap. They usually come with a pretty high price tag, but as you can see, from $20 to $27 a month, including SIPA filtering, they were really getting aggressive and being able to come and offer us solutions to help our school districts. Now today, those plans start at $12 and go up to $27. So they have continued through this time to concentrate on education and take that financial burden off of our school districts. And now all these plans, they're also nationwide offers. So this has kind of been a snowball effect that has continued on with our wireless providers across the state. The three big ones have really stepped up to help us out, it's AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. So to assist the districts even further during this time, so we had lots of stuff going on all at the same time. We formed a working group of agencies to address the connectivity issue that included the governor's office, Department of Community Affairs, including the Carl Vinson Institute with the work that they were doing, the Broadband Initiative and GTA. From that work, we were able to take data from the Broadband Mapping Initiative and lay over on top of it all the student addresses in the state. What that was able to do was provide us, like Bill was saying earlier, the number of students in our state who do not have the ability to be served with a landline internet service. So from that data, we were able to build a Power BI platform dashboard that we were able to share with the school district so they could see their own student population and the percentages of their own students that were going to not have the ability for this service. So knowing that even if the students didn't currently have internet access, they now knew that them possibly providing landline access was not going to be an option and they were going to have to look for something else. At that same time, GTA and DCA surveyed all the local government locations, including all the local municipalities, libraries, other sources that Bill and his team had on who had available outdoor open Wi-Fi access. Thus, the map was created that Bill showed earlier of all the open access across the state. So it was originally shared with school systems, but like Bill said, it's now publicly available for everyone to use. Because not only did we realize that it was an education issue, we also had a telehealth issue as well. So the public needed to have the ability to go to places to be able to do their in-person health checks and just to be able to see a doctor. So that was a great benefit out of that partnership as well. And I do want to underscore what Bill was saying about the Carl Vinson Institute and their mapping efforts. They are quick to respond. They have so many layers of data. They're willing to work with anyone, and that cross-collaborative teamwork that we had going on using our data and their data, it was quick, easy to get accomplished. Eric McCrae with Carl Vinson Institute is a great person to work with. Like I said, it proved we had product to be able to show quickly to be able to help school districts in their need. So after the meeting with the telecommunications community, the Georgia Foundation for Public Education received a donation from the AT&T Partnership Foundation to provide 475 Wi-Fi Ranger devices and 3 months of service to the neediest districts for mobile deployment. Wi-Fi Ranger devices are devices that were, they're a device that's primarily set up to go on a school bus. It's a device that it's a mobile device. It's not hard attached to the school bus. So it means you've got some flexibility with it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on a bus. AT&T was using their, the knowledge that they had gained in a project that they had just gotten through completing with the state of North Carolina, where they had deployed a few hundred school buses across the state to get into areas that, like us, have areas that would there's not just landline access for internet. So they took that experience, brought it to us, made that offer to the Georgia Foundation for Public Education, and we got those devices out there. So seeing the benefit of the Ranger deployment through that donation, the governor's office, along with state superintendent of schools, provided an additional $3 million in CARES and GEARS funding for additional Rangers. This effort provided an additional 2,400 Ranger devices and service for those devices for the school year 2021. Now, I'll say that our school districts got very creative in how they deployed these things. They didn't just limit them to vehicle type access. They actually bought the AC converters. They got cooperation with their local churches, with their local recreation centers, and they deployed these devices around in those areas where students could come together, practice social distancing, but also get the educational resources that they required. Some of our school districts even got even more crafty with these things. They actually went out and bought little miniature solar panels and attached them to buildings, and then attached the Wi-Fi Ranger to the buildings. So, you know, that right there just kind of explains where, you know, the effort was being put, and not also that, but just the need that our school districts were facing to be able to, you know, try to make as equitable solutions as possible for all students to be able to get content to online services. So to further provide assistance, we were able to gain access to the Ookla platform. There's cellular analytics. And if you don't know who Ookla is the company who produces the speed test app, which I'm sure most of us who are sitting here today have all used in some form or fashion, whether it's at home, testing out your, you know, connection from home, or seeing what kind of speed you're getting on your cell phone. So all that data is collected. The big crowdsource effort of data is collected through that speed test application. We also contracted with CTC, like Bill was saying, to provide districts with maps that show locations that best serve the areas for the Wi-Fi Rangers. CTC engineers use the Ookla cellular analytics along with tower source data to populate the maps. We were also able to load school locations, other government areas into the tool to assist the engineers in being able to show areas where people can come together in groups to get access for the instructional materials. The Ookla access also allow for specific consultation with districts to determine if certain service areas were within their districts and where it was available and where it wasn't available. And to also identify which providers in their school districts best serve them. As you all know, I mean, I've got two devices, one carrier, they're both different carriers. So we knew this was going to be a situation because, like sitting here today, one of my phones halfway works and the other one works well. So I was able to actually sit with school districts and consult with them on the areas to identify that where they might have problems. And also to actually identify, you know, before they made their purchases, what percentages of what carriers they needed to approach to fulfill the need for online access. One of the other things that we did at the agency, now knowing that school districts are going to start back in a remote environment, we created a guide called the Georgia K-12 Restart Guide. Inside of there are ways for, you know, teachers to learn how to do online teaching, how to get resources. Another part of that is a connectivity and device section specific to connectivity and devices. So to fulfill the content of that area, we formed another committee, which was chaired by Janine Miller with the Office of the Governor, We also had members from the department, including myself. We had 4 local superintendents. We had a local technology director. We had representation from the PTA. We had representation from the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, the Library System of Georgia. We had a local board member on there from a rural school district. We had representation from Community Affairs. We also had representation from the Georgia Telecommunications Association. What we were able to put together was a simple, comprehensive way for school districts who really didn't know what their options were to be able to go to this one section and be able to look at all the different options that are available to them. We even put together a flow chart that begins with, does a student have access, yes or no? And then from that part, they were able to go through and determine all the different actions. Could they even get to a park? Could they even get to a place where a school bus is? If not, the only other option for them was to be able to go buy a connection through one of their telecommunication providers. We also provided them a template that they could use to determine what's this going to cost us for however long we feel like we're going to need this, whether it's going to be for the entire school year or not. So the template allowed them to plug in the different devices for the cost, the different service plans, and any other options that they may be presented with the telecommunication providers to give them that annual snapshot of this is what it's going to take for us to accomplish distance learning in our district when it comes to technology. So with all of that effort that had gone on for those months, it led the governor to allocate an additional $29 million for additional connectivity projects back through the Department of Ed. So in saying that, I'm going to kick it over to Bob now to give you guys some insight on the next projects we have working and what's coming up next.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that huge introduction into what you actually accomplished, Chris. I cannot go without saying that Chris single-handedly created an environment to help those districts get so much stuff done. I mean, he went out and got those carriers involved. He went out and did those plans. He worked with CCC. We were in a crisis situation, and Chris really stepped up and solved a ton of problems. So I cannot tell you just how much that guy worked to make it better for K-12 education in those early months of the pandemic. And as he said, sometime in July time, we were still in the pandemic. The governor had on the green here. Hopefully I can do it appropriately. Let's see here. I do not see my slides. There we go. So he brought up the grant that we got in July, and what I wanted to do is just point out some of this audience that we're having to address. And it's been brought up many times, but there's 1.8 million public school students in Georgia. There's 120,000 public school teachers. There's 50,000 administrators, and all these people need access to broadband. There's 2,300 schools, campuses that need broadband access. And when we talk about households, there's 1 million households that actually need access. And there's about 1.8 kids per household. And that works out to about 1 million households that we're really trying to address when we talked about connectivity. And Chris already talked about the state. The latest numbers aren't in yet. But my guess is we're going to be awfully close to 1-to-1 because of all the deployments. And we've got 100 megabytes of bandwidth going to all 2,300 schools. That's kind of where we were in July. And then what happened in July is the governor received some funds through the GEARS funds, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, and he allocated close to $30 million to public K-12 to increase student connectivity. And really, we sat down and we tried to figure out, well, where do we invest these funds? What do we need to do? And it became very apparent that education had changed considerably. education adapted to the environment. And they started doing things that we just never thought they would be possible. They were, as many they were teaching online courses at the same time they're teaching in class. Many districts went back into face-to-face, but they have options for all the kids to stay home if they chose to. And so you had a mix. Teachers were teaching online classes while they were teaching in-person classes. And so we saw our bandwidth, our little 100 megabytes of bandwidth, which up to that point in time had been more than sufficient to deal with the in-class work the teachers were doing, but it was topping out. And many of our districts are going 120, 130% of capacity and losing connectivity because of it. The thing that we saw was education was shifting. And even though they were doing in-class instruction, we found that many of the teachers were changing how they were teaching, and it was moving more towards the digital environment. It was interesting to hear the speaker from Emory this morning talking about how higher ed changed, and K-12 had to kind of follow the same way. And so one of the first things that we wanted to do with that money was increase bandwidth in the classroom. The second thing that we wanted to do is we needed to get in support of social distancing as best we could. And of course, the kids that came onto campus still needed to be able to have access. And so we talked about how do we get stuff onto the campus, but not necessarily just in the classroom. And that's the second project that we spun off. And I'm going to go into these in more detail in just a second. And then the last one was the homework gap, which existed long before the pandemic and will exist long after the pandemic is resolved. But it's really something that was exacerbated by the pandemic. So the first one that we had tackled, they increased the bandwidth in the classroom. We currently said we're at 2,300, at 100 megabytes for all 2,300 schools, which was sufficient in most cases. This was 100 megabytes per school. So if you had 10 schools, you had a gig coming into your district, and the district could allocate it however they chose to. It didn't have to go to 100 per school. If they chose to send more to the high schools and fewer to the elementaries, they could do that. But we dropped that capacity at the district level, and then they allocated it. What we did was we used about $10 million of that GEARS funds to double the bandwidth, to move it to 200 megabytes, which in most cases would provide enough connectivity for them to continue doing the virtual classrooms that they were going along with. And so we worked with PeachNet. Obviously, PeachNet is a university network coming from the Board of Regents. 7 years ago, we worked with them, partnered with them to set up PeachNet for the K-12 districts. And they've been a phenomenal partner this whole time. They've grown with us. They're every step of the way. So when we talked to them about doubling the bandwidth, they were very responsive, came back right away with, here's what we can do to make that happen. We just happened to be in the process of renewing our contract and switching over to a different, or they were in the process of switching over to a different vendor. So it was really a good time to talk about how do we upgrade the switches that need to be upgraded? How do we move to 200 megabytes? And so we started that as quickly as possible. And what we did was we purchased that 5 years into the future. Board of Regents was more than flexible to say, if you want to pay us in advance, you can do that. And we will provide this bandwidth 5 years into the future. So we didn't just buy 1 year of sustainability. We bought 5 years of sustainability. So we're good now with 200 megabytes going into 5 years into the future. The way we pay for this is a big chunk of it is paid for by E-rate because we're about 80% free and reduced lunch in our state, which means that E-rate pays for about 80% of the bill. 20% is paid for with state funds, and now with the governor's emergency GEARS funds. So that's how we did that, and we're also using some of those funds to handle additional switching equipment because As we said, some districts were right at that 1 gig level and needed to move to a 10 gig switch. When we doubled up a district that had maybe 5 schools, they went right to the 10 and they were right at the borderline. So we're also paying to upgrade their connectivity equipment. The next thing we wanted to do is look at what do we do about the campus itself. And we said, you know, we know that districts have probably installed some antennas themselves, but not everybody has. And so what we wanted to be is consistent across the state. And we are basically offered every district, every one of their schools, the installation of a Wi-Fi antenna.
Hey, Bob.
It's 2,300. That's a lot of antennas to go. What it does is,
Hey, Bob.
yes.
It's kind of choppy, your video. I'm thinking, and we're not seeing slides. We're seeing you, but your video is pretty choppy. You might want to turn off your video,
Okay.
your camera, and put your slides, do a screen share of your slides.
Okay. I thought I was doing that, but clearly I'm not. So hold on.
We're mostly hearing everything you say, but I'm a little bit concerned that you must not have broadband up there where you are.
Well, you know what? Up in Gwinnett County, or I'm sorry, North Hall County, we do not have the best internet connectivity. And so I turned off my video, so you don't have to look at me anymore.
Well, you sound good.
And now you can sound me. I'm going to do a screen share. And I picked this one.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
It's coming. It's coming. There we go.
Okay.
Now I think you're good.
So Bill, this afternoon, Dina's going to tell us how she's going to fix Bob's problem.
All right. So
Of course she is.
okay, I can tell all of you my connectivity yesterday was 0.7 upload and 0.2 download. So we've had a lot of rain up here, and every time it rains, our internet gets worse and worse and worse. So again, yeah, I will benefit from the RDOF programs that are going out. So let me see if I can just get me back on track here, since you guys haven't seen my slides. Bump that up here.
You might want to hit presentation mode. There we go. Beautiful.
See that now? Okay.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
All right. So we talked about the campuses, increased bandwidth on the school campuses, because we wanted to actually promote social distancing. We wanted kids to be able to come to the campus. Some schools were all virtual, but the kids would gather out in the parking lots and be able to get access to the Wi-Fi. You know, this is on top of the stuff that Chris and installed, you know, early on. This is basically adding additional to that. The Wi-Fi rangers, this is a little bit different than the Wi-Fi rangers. This won't be mobile. This is actually a fixed antenna, you know, on the side of the building. So again, adding to that, and we're also providing a 5-year license along the way to make sure that people have support for that connectivity device. So that's ongoing right now. As you can imagine, it takes a while to install 2,300 antennas across the state of Georgia. So we are actively working with AT&T to do that right now. The last one, and we basically allocated another $10 million to the antennas. And this last one worked out to just about 10 million, just a little over $10 million for connectivity to address the homework gap. And for those of you who are not K-12, you may never have heard of the homework gap, but basically it happens when a student goes to class all day long and then goes home at night to work on assignments that have been given them during the day, and they need internet connectivity, but they don't have it. Either they don't have access to it because they can't afford it. It's just not available in their area. Whatever the reason is, typically we call that the homework gap. A lot of times it's called the digital divide. But it's really something that's been around for a long time. And we wanted to make sure that we could solve that problem as best we could. And when I say solve, I don't know if it's going to fix it permanently or forever, but we're going to address it as best we can. And what we find that a lot of times the internet connectivity that a student doesn't have isn't because they don't have access to it as far as is served in their area. It's because they can't afford it. Many times, not having internet is a poverty issue. It's because you have to choose between, do I have food on the table or do I buy internet? And when you have choices like that, typically the internet loses out. And so what we decided to do is try to figure out, how do we get to the most needy students and get internet into their homes without jeopardizing any of the other things that they need to take care of. And so here's where Carl Vinson came into play again. As Chris talked about, we also tapped into the Carl Vinson maps, and we gave them all the kids, and we worked with DCA, Department of Community Affairs. They identified about 750 low-income housing locations, because we figured that the kids in low-income housing are most likely to be the ones who can't afford internet access. And so we looked at those addresses of those 750 locations, and we gave them over to Carl Vinson, and then we gave them the addresses of all of our kids. And they came back and they basically said, there's 49,000 kids living in low-income housing that are K-12 students. Now, we did all this, obviously, without sharing any student information whatsoever. There's no privacy was violated here. There's just all addresses. But that really helped us put a handle on, well, what does our homework gap look like in Georgia? What can we do to address that? And so what we're doing right here is we are walking into really uncharted territory. We've never at the state level worked directly with parents to try to get internet into their homes. And so we're working obviously closely with the districts, trying to understand how best do we do this. The districts are going to be key in this whole program. We have not launched it yet. We are still working through the vendor contracts, which really have been enabled by GTA. GTA and its wide array of state level contracts have really allowed us to use the best of the best and not go through procurement efforts on our own. These have all been done in advance and saved us a ton of time and effort, and also have some fantastic contracts for us to work off of. But those things are what we're using to try to address the homework gap, and the districts will be key in how we talk to the parents, or how they talk to the parents. We're going to be the second line of support. We're going to be there to support the districts, but obviously the districts are the ones that the parents know. The districts are the ones the parents trust, and that'll be up to individual districts to decide how they want to deploy these. But we are busily working on the funding and the methodology to roll this out to the districts in hopes of providing some relief to the homework gap for those 49,000 students. So if we're able to execute this to the fullest, there will be a real dent put into the homework gap in Georgia. Excuse me. So that's what we're doing right now with the GEARS funds. That's how we're spending the GEARS funds. But there's more money coming. And you probably have realized this. I mean, all the money they've talked about with the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion contains the CARES funds, the GEARS funds. It also contains the FCC funds. FCC is put out something called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, $3.2 billion. And this is something where individuals can get up to $50 a month, qualified individuals. And of course, this requires you to be at a certain poverty level. But the FCC has this program in place and active, and it will spend that money until it's gone. So people can receive $50 a month to pay for their internet, and also a one-time $100 credit to buy computer equipment. And this program is out there and active. The issue, it's not an issue, but the state's not able to jump in and do that. Individuals have to apply for it. It's very similar to the Lifeline program, where individuals can apply for a phone and that type of thing. And so it still has to be done that way. So what we have is a communication challenge where we've got to get out to the people who are eligible for this and let them know that they need to apply. Because once the money's gone in this, the program would end. but they are talking about further funding of this program. The FCC is also putting out something called the Emergency Connectivity Fund. This is $7.2 billion. And this is really out to help schools put in the equipment that's needed to maintain the remote learning environment. And the really good thing about this is it's reimbursable back into the beginning of the pandemic. This means that districts have spent the money doing this already, can actually apply for reimbursement, which is a huge help because a lot of districts had to just pay for that themselves. It just money wasn't available when the crisis hit. And so they had to pay for it out of funds that they had to find themselves. And this will allow that to be reimbursed. And it is $7.2 billion. And there's a lot more funds that can be used for education. The CARES funds themselves, Georgia has received close to, I'd say, $7 billion in CARES funds. We call them CARES 1, CARES 2, and CARES 3 that are coming into education to help with primarily the learning loss. The students, they talk about the learning loss, and this is the opportunity for kids to learn where they weren't in school and didn't have everything they needed. So that's where most of the money is earmarked towards, but it also can be used to support broadband and internet connectivity because that's a key essential component of providing for the learning loss. And then there's some federal legislation too that is most likely going to be passed. It's called the Accessible Affordable Internet Act for All. It's another $94 billion. And a lot of that is putting more money back into the FCC programs. And it does contain two specific initiatives to build out the broadband infrastructure and promote its use to the specific ones. One, to further support and home internet, the very things that we're working on are going to get another $5 billion. And then school buses, they've authorized Wi-Fi on school buses, which obviously Chris talked about how that's a readily available thing that's already being done in Georgia, but this provides even more funding for that. So these are two things that are coming down the pike that will further enhance remote learning, which obviously is going to be needed because as some of the people talked about earlier this morning, we're probably not going back to how it ever was ever again. It is going to change, and it can change for the better. Technology certainly can be an enabler to a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. And so hopefully we'll use this money as effectively as possible. But that is what I had to talk about today. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bill, I guess.
Sure, Bob. Thanks, Chris and Bob. That was great. So we'll open it up for audience questions now. If anybody has any questions, submit them and I'll read them out, and Chris and Bob can respond to them. Well, I don't see any questions at this point, Chris or Bob. I guess, what do you think is, with all the funding that's becoming available, what do you think is the biggest challenge in effectively using the funding to close the homework gap and provide connectivity that, people in our audience might have a play in or might be able to help, solve?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is going to be communication. I mean, there is a lot of money coming in, but getting it down to a parent to understand that they need to apply for something, or they need to go onto an internet site and put in their information. I mean, that's all stuff that is foreign to a lot of people, and if they don't understand what it's for or who is asking them to do it, chances are it won't be done. And so what that is, to me, the biggest challenge is making sure that parents, students understand what is available to them. And that's, again, why the districts play such a central theme. And I'm sure this will go down to the school level too, whereas principals will probably be calling together, groups of parents saying, here's programs that we have to offer you. So communications, to me, is going to be the key.
Yeah, and I agree with Bob too. Is one of the things we have to try to do is educate the districts not to duplicate efforts where they've already made strides using one funding source to kind of look at all of them and see where they all best apply.
So we've got two questions. So the first one is from Ryan. He's thanking you guys for all your hard work. And one of his questions, will there be literature that can be handed out to parents for these new internet programs?
Yes, I can speak on the EBV one. Yet there are literature packs that are being put together. One of the things that the agency has done is we actually shared information with the USDOE, the nutrition side, USDA, and what they're doing is the data that we shared were for all the districts that pretty much classify as a 100% free and reduced lunch district. They're actually going to be contacting the districts and putting together a communication plan. There's going to be handouts. There's going to be websites specifically designed to point people to. What they're trying to do with this plan or this process is, I'm not sure how many of you out there are familiar with the Lifeline project, but it didn't have such a good reputation for being easy to access, and they're trying to eliminate all that this time. So that information will be coming. And Bob, I don't know if you've got information on the other ones.
Yeah, for the doubling the bandwidth, you guys already know all about that. Chris done a great job, keeping you informed. The antenna program, we're sending out information, but that's all in the local campus. So the last one, which is the challenging one to the parents, we will be putting together an information pack that basically says, here's what the program is. Here are documents to talk to the parents about. So, because as Chris said, we want to be consistent. We don't want every district trying to do it differently. And so we want to basically put together a communication packet. And that will be coming soon. We, as I said, are still working with the vendors to hammer out all the details, because as you know, we prefer to be able to give you the highest speed at the lowest cost. And so things like a wired solution may be the best option over a Wi-Fi solution, but not everybody has a wired connection. Not everybody even has a Wi-Fi solution. So we're working with the vendors again with these mapping tools that Carl Vincent gave us to make sure that we have all 49,000 students with a solution. And once we have all that put together, then we'll be able to give the districts, okay, here's what we can do for your district. Here's what we can do for your district. And so that whole package will be coming out as soon as we get the vendor thing worked out.
So I have another question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Chris, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah. So another question is, they're interested to hear more about the K-12, Georgia K-12 Restart Guide and efforts to teach educators about the mechanics of virtual learning technologies and options.
Okay. I'll tell you what I'll do. I will pull the link and share it with you guys. So Bill, I don't know if you got any more questions that you can go to.
No. Don't forget to hit screen share. Let's see, Jason put the here's the link to the outreach toolkit. I guess I'll put that in the chat window if I can do that. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. To panelists and these. Shoot. Okay, I put the EBB program outreach toolkit link in the chat window for everybody. Hopefully you can see that. Now, we do have another question. It says, how long will it take to get new infrastructure in place? That's a good one. I like that one. Yeah, Chris, how long is that going to take?
I don't know. I thought Dina was going to tell us this afternoon.
Well, it could mean infrastructure, meaning the Wi-Fi extenders at the school buildings. I think all the schools have fiber going into them now, so I don't think we have an issue there. I'm not sure which infrastructure Joe is referring to.
So I know, so let's talk on the extender project. Since we're using, the contracts that you guys have in place through GTA, using the AT&T resource, they actually have, I believe it's a network of 16 different companies across the state that they're going to be utilizing to install these.
So here's another question. Has use of Wi-Fi networks outside of school, library, and other public buildings and the corresponding parking lot classrooms led to other security concerns?
None that we are aware of. When we first went into this, we were concerned about the, possibility of credentialing and things like that. But with the access that they have, the content filtering, that hasn't seemed to be a problem. We haven't heard of any, confrontational type events or anything like that. No.
Do you anticipate long-term school redesign or relocations so that schools have high bandwidth?
I think, like Bob was talking about earlier, we've just seen a complete transformation in how the instructional model works. Like he was talking about what we're seeing as far as the utilization of bandwidth. Schools have now gone into a process of the resources that they're all using are pretty much all online at this point. So of course the bandwidth requirements are going to be higher. That's why we've seen the FCC change the E-rate program to where they're allowing for, the reimbursement of upgrades that have had to have been made. They're also allowing for, they know that this is becoming a national trend. So the requirement for additional bandwidth is there, and they're helping to offset that program with that program. The way schools are modeled on the inside, that model is changing. What is it going to end up being like? I think it's going to be dependent on the school systems themselves, because the state of Georgia is a local control state. Everyone sets their own learning plans, the way that they operate within school buildings. So we're starting to see, classroom environments not within a set of four walls. That one classroom environment now is spreading out. So yeah, we are starting to see that. And more than likely, we'll start seeing school design start to change to follow that footprint as well. Because if you think about it, if you know much about education, we kind of saw that a while back in the 80s going into the 90s, when we started having a big influx of the CTAE learning environments. Those rooms had to be bigger because they had to accommodate for more equipment and things like that. So we're starting to see that same type concept now with school systems and spreading out the learning environments, but also building within the learning environments the infrastructure to be able to handle the bandwidth required for all that.
Chris or Bob, do you know if there's any outreach programs planned to educate parents on how to apply for the Internet Fund programs?
The EBB one, yes.
Does DOE is DOE putting together an outreach plan to communicate? Or I guess typically you communicate through the districts to the parents. I mean, I think overall we rely on the districts who have a more trusted relationship with parents. Is that not true?
That is true.
So what you put together will be to arm the districts to better communicate. Right?
Yes. And I know that USDA is working with our nutrition director right now. I've heard of possibility doing some like PSAs to possibly get the word out to make this happen better. I know the FCC, like through their promotional materials that they're putting together, that they're even talking about doing the same thing. So yeah, I mean, they're trying to get this information in the hands of the parents for sure.
Right. Here's a question. Are there new technologies on the horizon that will make it easier to get broadband to rural localities?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Is there new technologies that are on the horizon to get connectivity to rural locations on the forefront? Do we see new technologies that are going to possibly be used to expand connectivity?
Yeah, I mean, with what they're doing now with the fixed Wi-Fi, that's one of the areas that, I'm seeing where there's going to be a big influx to try to address that now, especially with the rollout of 5G across the state. That seems to be where a lot of the carriers are looking at making strides, where, putting that infrastructure in place that requires that hard line. This is the way to jump over that for the time being and give, pretty good speeds. A good friend of mine just had it installed. He was one of these people who had landline access, but guess what? He was getting less than 10 down and 1 up. So now he's got 45 down and 16 up with fixed Wi-Fi. So
Right.
we see that as some of the, probably where it's going to impact the students and households the quickest.
This was probably a Keith or a Caitlin question, but I'll put it out there for you and Bob. Is there a plan to train faculty to do virtual training confidently and competently?
Yes, I have actually got those training courses compiled now. I believe some of those are being offered through our professional learning platform. They started rolling those out actually last spring, and I think they've even put together a larger catalog to support that effort now.
Well, that appears to be all the questions. If we'll give it a minute or two here and see if there's any more questions. Bob, anything you want to add to all this?
No, I think what's going to drive this whole conversation, everything we're talking about is, the infrastructure, but where education's focus is that learning loss. And I think how they address the learning loss is going to have a huge impact on how the infrastructure is going to be used. If they shift over to something that's not as infrastructure dependent, then you'll see it shift a different way. So, I'm hearing a lot about the two big arguments that I'm hearing, not arguments, but discussions, is one about what is the learning loss and how to address it. And the other one is virtual versus in-person instruction. There's still a lot of people who feel like K-12, you have to be in person. You really can't do what you need to do with a child when they're just remote all the time. And so I think you're going to have that discussion ongoing, and then you have the discussion about how to address the learning loss. Those are the two big things that are going to really affect, the infrastructure, I think.
So I think I can answer the next question. It says, is fixed Wi-Fi available for individuals? Chris, I think you meant fixed wireless, right?
I did.
Right. And, I want to know, is it available and what is the ballpark price? Well, we know that AT&T and Windstream and other fixed wireless providers do offer it in different parts of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And typically my understanding is that the broadband service they're offering is at their standard, offer rates. I don't know what the prices are off the top of my head unless Bob, you or Chris do.
The one that I'm aware of is right around $50 a month.
Okay. Here's a question. Will there be training for homeschooling folks, parents and caretakers whose children need to be schooled remotely? Will there be training for them, parents and caregivers doing
happen at the district level? As Chris said, we're a local controlled state. So, the DOE can't really get in between that relationship with, a homeschool parent and the district that they're homeschooled out of. So, I think that'll be a district by district thing. The state has a role for homeschool, but so far it's not been anything that involved.
So Bob, are you aware of any school districts making training available to parents who do homeschooling? Are any of them doing that?
I'm not that I'm aware of. It is the whole concept is a parent decides that they want to homeschool their child, and they have to make a declaration every year saying, I'm in this district, but I'm going to homeschool my child. And the districts have to kind of keep track of that. And so there's an opportunity for districts to reach out to the parents if they choose to do that. I don't believe there's an obligation under any federal laws that require that, but that's something that would be, like I said, up to the local district to decide how they're going to do that.
Well, here's another homeschooling question, which is, do we anticipate aid for homeschooling, like devices, computers, equipment, right? For equipment, basically, right?
The only thing that I'm aware of is during the original CARES relief funds that were put out, there was as a portion of it's called equitable services. And those equitable services are really geared towards private schools, not necessarily those that are in a homeschool environment.
Well, in the EBB program, I think there is an allowance for equipment, but I don't think it's a lot, but I think there is something.
It's $100.
Okay.
And I'm hearing that one of the carriers on state contract, one of the big three, is getting ready to come out with a Chromebook solution that is possibly going to fit inside of that program and so it would be pretty much a no cost per month solution with a very small equipment fee.
Cool. Here's another one. Do we have statistics on the percentage of students that have equipment they need for remote schooling? So, I mean, I think you talk in terms of 1-to-1. I think that's the words educators use. So
Yes.
Do you have statistics today where we are?
We are gathering them right now as we speak. We actually have a survey that's out on the street. And I'll tell you from the results that I'm seeing so far, it looks like our ratio is going to be it's going to be better than 1-to-1.
What does that mean in layman's terms?
It means that there's going to be more equipment than students.
And so it's the district's responsibility to get the equipment into the student family's hands.
Yes. And one of the things that we've been doing also as far as promotion of home-based learning is to not just allow the student to use that device. We've asked districts to have flexibility in their guidance to the parents to allow that device that's being brought home can be used for other things other than just schoolwork, that the parents can use it for applications, to offset job loss, telemedicine, anything that a parent would need to do that requires a connection or requires connectivity to a computing device, to allow that school-based computer to be used for those efforts. We tried to get that guidance out earlier, and we still continue to push. And many districts have been very receptive to that because they understand it, because they're experiencing it themselves.
Well, I don't see any more questions. So unless one comes in just a moment, Chris and Bob, thank you very much for your time today. It was great. I think next, I believe if you'll check the chat window, there's going to be 3 break Zoom meeting links placed in there. One is for meeting with Merlin, one of our sponsors. Another one is for Compliance Point, and another is for just informal networking. I think the links have been put into the chat window now. And then we will reconvene at 12:30 for the next session, which is titled Good Data for Good Decisions on Broadband, where Dina Perry, Executive Director of Broadband for DCA, and Eric McRae, Director at the University of Georgia, will walk through a lot of the data and information and mapping and tool assets that have been developed to assist communities thinking and planning about broadband projects or applying for state or federal grant programs. So I think that should be very informative, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys back here at this link at 12:30.
Hey, before we jump off, Bill,
Yeah.
I just want to let everybody, other agencies that may be listening, if you have any initiatives that are going on, I advise you to reach out to GTA and to DCA when it comes to broadband initiatives. They were instrumental in being able to help us as quickly as they, as fast as we were able to get these plans put out there and give connectivity options out across the state. You couldn't ask for a better group of guys to work with. Very receptive. And you want to talk about teamwork. I've never experienced teamwork like that working in the state of Georgia in my life. I've been a state employee for over 22 years now, and it was phenomenal working with these guys. So if you think you knew negative things about them, throw it to the side and jump on. It was worth the ride. And we're still riding.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bob. You guys have a great lunch, and we'll be back at 12:30 for the next session.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye-bye.